I believe I did see this movie years ago, but I couldn't really remember anything about it. So it was good to see it again now. Um, it starts with this great credit scene with great music and a lot of still, sort of sexy black and white still photos. And that may have just been a cheap way of creating a sequence, just use still photos. But I think it actually kind of worked as setting up the feel of the movie. I kind of like that. And the opening scene, you see some shots of the city, and then you see a bald guy in a suit walking down the street like he means business. And it seems kind of effective. It kind of grabs you, but then it just goes on too long. It's like he just keeps on walking and walking through the street, and you're kind of like, what the hell, man? I get it. He's walking down the street. So finally, he shows up. We see a sign that says billiards, and he looks through the door, and he might be crying. I actually wasn't sure whether he was crying or sweating, but he might be crying as he looks through the door. And there's a bunch of guys playing pool inside there, and he goes in and he attacks a younger guy. And this is where you first hear dialogue, and it does sound bad. Like it sounds very artificial, not recorded on the scene as we know it wasn't. Um, and he says something like, Mary, you killed her. And this fight breaks out. And it's just, it almost seems to rival the epic put on the glasses fight scene from John Carpenter's They Live, which goes on for about 5.5 minutes, I think, in They Live. This one, it just keeps going, and much like the walking scene, it just goes on a little too long. It just keeps on going. I was kind of shocked to take a look at it after and see it was only 2 minutes. It wasn't 5.5, but it felt like 5.5 minutes. It just kind of went on and on. And then finally, the bald guy, kind of gets the better of the young guy, and he says, if you ever come near my house again, I kill you. I'll kill you. I swear it. And he leaves. And the young man slowly recovers, and the camera kind of shakes around, which I thought was kind of cool. It's kind of a low budget kind of technique. And then we finally get those kind of wavy lines that they like to use to sort of signify that we're now flashing back and we're going to the beginning of the story where it all started. So I thought that was kind of a good opening sequence, kind of set things up. It's like, hey, what happened here? What's going on? This guy killed Mary? Who's Mary? What's going on? So, I thought that was, aside from the fact that, things went on a bit too long, I thought that was actually kind of intriguing. And then we see the young guy in an apartment hallway, and the sort of fun music comes back. The fun music had kind of not been there during this fight sequence, but the kind of cool, fun music comes back. And I really like that. I like the music in this. So then, he knocks on a door, and this woman answers the door, and we get the voiceover line. The first time I saw Mary, I knew there had to be trouble. And again, I thought this was kind of brilliant, in a kind of a campy way. And then, we find out that this is Frankie, and he's Bob's brother, and this is Mary. She's Bob's wife. And, right away, he's sort of saying he wants to take her in his arms. And, I found that kind of strange because there's no slow burn buildup, of sexual tension. There's no sort of falling in love gradually. There's nothing. He's already getting ideas the first time he sees her. And they sit on the couch talking, and this is where, I first noticed that you could see their lips were moving with the sound. And I was kind of impressed because I was used to, like in the fight scene, when he says that thing about if you ever come around my house, like, I don't think his lips are even moving there. I think we can kind of see this line just comes out of nowhere as he's kind of walking off. But here the lips were kind of going with it. And I thought, oh, interesting, like she actually synced it up. But anyway, again on the couch here, he's saying things like, if Bob had told me about you, I would have been here sooner. Bob, he did all right. You're quite the dish, and he's kind of hitting on her already, and she kind of goes to the kitchen and has this internal monologue. And I thought that that's where it works kind of the best, like this artificial dialogue. It sounds better as the monologue that's in the head of the characters, not when it's supposedly the talking, because it sounds really phony when they're talking. But as an internal monologue, it kind of works. And she kind of says that, she sort of thinks that Frankie's exciting. She thinks he's more exciting than her husband, which I find very strange because, they haven't really talked about anything. He's just kind of said a few inappropriate things to her. I would have to say the script is underdeveloped, I guess, is what I'm saying here. It doesn't do a good job of developing this relationship or the attraction that they feel for each other. I mean, there could have been, they could have had a conversation where he said, oh, here's the things I've done, here's my life, here's how I live. And she could have thought, oh, interesting, this guy has an exciting life. But no, she just kind of decides that he's exciting for some reason. And she also says something about Bob letting his life pass by, but we don't even know anything about Bob, and she doesn't take the time to explain, oh, he's got a dead-end job, he's got boring hobbies, whatever it is, we don't know. She just it's all kind of cryptic, but then of course Bob comes home and they all sit down together, and Bob mentions that he ran into an old friend of Frankie's, this woman Zena, who's interested in Frankie, and he kind of seems to be interested in her as well. But this is something else, is that there's kind of jarring moments, where he mentions this Zena, and Frankie starts to say, oh yeah, Zena, yeah, we had some good times together. And then Bob suddenly cuts him off and says, what about food, Mary? And he kind of changes the subject, and it feels very, I don't know, not quite natural, the way that kind of cuts away. And also when he says that, Frankie should get married, being married's a good thing. I didn't used to think that I wanted to get married either, but hey, if anything happened to Mary, why? And then he kind of shifts instantly and says, look, kid, why don't you stay in town? It's just like he's in the middle of a sentence and he kind of changes what he's saying. It's very, very jarring. It doesn't kind of feel natural. But anyway, this is all to say it's very, very interesting. And a lot of this stuff I find amusing. Like I found myself laughing in some of these moments, like where he says, what about food, Mary? It's just like, it sort of comes out of nowhere, and it made me laugh. But yeah, I mean, I could say so much more about it here. But again, when Frankie, they give him a room to stay in, and Mary finds a gun in his suitcase when she's going to help him unpack, and she finds a gun in there. And so this is where I feel like Doris Wishman is showing her technique, her sort of Chekhov kind of technique here, where Chekhov used to say, if you're going to have a gun on the wall at the beginning of a play, it better go off before the end of the play. And so here they've shown us a gun in the first 15 minutes of the movie, and my God, it is going to go off by the end of the movie. So she's showing her skill at structuring this. But he then sort of has an internal monologue, and he talks about how he's going to spend a couple of weeks here, and it's going to be like a vacation, They'll get good food and all this other stuff, and with a little luck, some loving on the side. If he can convince Mary that she didn't start living until she met me, and that shouldn't be too hard. She looks bored. So, but and then he says, so so Xena's still in town now. There's a girl. She's got everything and a little bit more. The kind of dame a fella never forgets. So on the one hand, he's saying, "Ooh, I'm really interested in Mary, and I'm going to hopefully have some loving on the side." But hey, wait a minute, Xena. I'm going to get with Xena. What's going on here? He's got two different women that he seems to be equally interested in. Does he already know that he's not really interested in Mary and he's just using her? Or is that an idea that comes along later? I don't know. But one thing's for sure, he's not a very sympathetic guy. It's in the first 15 minutes here. He's clearly not really the hero of the story. And then we meet Xena, and she's having kind of a wild party, almost like a pseudo orgy, except everybody's in clothes. And Frankie shows up, and they have a bit of an argument, and they eventually kind of get it on, still wearing clothes. And this is, I found myself thinking it's all strangely chaste for an exploitation film or a sexploitation film. There hasn't even been any nudity in it. Just people kind of getting it on a little bit with their clothes on. And finally, at 24 minutes into the movie, Mary takes her top off, and we get some nudity. And I suppose you could say it's like a slow burn tease, that Doris Wishman is kind of making us wait to see the nudity. And maybe that's a good idea. I don't know. But shortly after that, we get the scene where Mary, after doing the nudity, she puts on this sexy negligee, and she's sort of trying to get Bob interested in her, but he seems like he's completely disinterested, like you were saying about your version of it. I find it hard to believe how disinterested he is in her, because they're not a couple that's been together for 20 years or something. They got married within the last 2 years. So it seems very odd to me that he's so disinterested. And then she says things like, "Where must I go for love? Where? Don't you understand that I want to be loved?" And he says, "I can't understand you. Maybe you'd better see Dr. Brown tomorrow." This is all gold. This is all cinema gold here, as far as I'm concerned. So this is a clunky way of justifying the affair that she's going to have, because where can she go for love? She's obviously going to have to go to Bob's brother. Bob is essentially driving her into the arms of Frankie. Anyway, I found also it's an interesting story, because it's almost like shades of All About Eve, in the sense that you've got, he winds up kind of using Mary. He's basically trying to manipulate her into taking out all the money that they have in their bank account, and he's lying to her. He's, we're going to go to Mexico, we're going to get married, but he needs that money, otherwise he won't be able to do that. And she's kind of in love with him, and she wants to stay with him, so she's going to maybe do that. But meanwhile, he seems to be really in love with Xena, and she's kind of saying the same thing. It's like, well, without money, you don't have Xena. You gotta get that $2,000. So it's kind of like she's playing him the same way that he's playing Mary. And then, of course, there's this cousin, Della, who shows up and is wearing leather, and there's leather gloves, and I don't know, is this some sort of a code here? Some sort of code for lesbians or something in the 60s? But something's going on there. Anyway, I don't know. I could go on and on and on about this, but basically I just, I found all this stuff very, it's kind of bad, but it's kind of it's kind of good bad. Like I kind of like it. It's making me laugh. I found it very entertaining.
Mhm.
Um, and I probably just talked way too much about it. But what do you think about any of this stuff?
No, I was amused by your summation. Just because I'm so familiar with Doris Wishman's filmography, it's just interesting to hear someone else's perspective on it. For me, I don't find her movies to be good bad. I find them to be bad bad. And to me, what fascinates me about her movies is thinking about what's happening behind the scenes while I watch her movies. Just thinking about like how it's being made, and that's what fascinates me. It's just like knowing that like the reason I'm seeing this tree is because they didn't record dialogue. Yeah. The reason this
Yes.
is going on so long is because they didn't know where it was going. Or me trying to imagine like what she's yelling at these actors in the middle of this scene. So to me, the machinations of it is what it's almost like watching a car crash for me. That's what I find fascinating about it. I don't find it good bad. The only parts that I think were entertaining on the screen, the opening was really good. You're right. It could have been tight. It could have been a couple minutes shorter, that whole opening sequence. But from that walk until he goes into that apartment and talks about like how he wants his brother's wife, all that was good. I mean, it could
Yeah.
have been tightened up a lot. It could have been shortened up a lot, but the movie started off great with him marching like he's this overweight middle-aged man. Like,
Yeah.
who's like, what's got him pissed? Where is he going? Yeah, there's so many questions in your mind when you see him doing that march. And you're right. Is he sweating? Is he crying? Is the actor just tired? Because it's like, that walk to me was one of the best parts of the film. Just like his determination in his face,
Yes.
and the fight, and then into the flashback, and him immediately saying, "What a sleazeball!" Like the minute he walks in, oh, I'm gonna fuck my brother's wife.
Yeah.
What a piece of shit. You know?
Yeah.
So to me, that whole opening sequence was fun. And I love that scene where he turns down his wife. I thought there was an interesting camera angle too, because they swooped the camera over the ceiling back and forth, I think like twice. So it was one of the rare times where it was like artistically, it looked pretty cool. The cinematography and the fact that she's like, I want you, just like ravage me. It's like, I'm so young. I need you. I need you inside me. She's begging him for sex, and he's like, maybe we ought to take you to the doctor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. There's
how
something
can you
wrong with you.
watch that and not laugh out loud? It's
Yeah.
just,
Exactly. Yeah. It's
yeah,
hilarious.
it was great. It was great. But those were the only two highlights for me. Otherwise, it was I kept thinking about like why I kept thinking about you. I'm like, man, he probably hates me. Like I made him watch this movie. It's like it's going nowhere. Because when you surmise it, when you talk about what happens, it's like this is an interesting movie. It's an interesting concept. That's why I wanted to take it for my movie.
Mhm.
And I haven't seen this movie in a long time. I shot, I forget when exactly I shot Scumbag Hustler, but it was a long time ago. And prior to shooting it, it was a long time before I saw my brother's wife. So I shot my brother's wife a really long time ago. I probably saw it a couple times within like a year or two, a long, long time ago. Haven't seen it since until we watched it for this review. In my mind, I remembered all the bullet points. I remember the fight and him rejecting his wife. I remembered like the plot outline, but I didn't remember the movie itself. But when you only remember the bullet points, it all sounds interesting. This
Mhm.
sleazeball guy comes in, bangs his brother's wife, gets a bunch of money just to give it to some other whore that wants to run off with the money. Now he's left broke. The wife is all distraught. She already ruined her marriage and she kills her. It all sounds so salacious. It's just the
Mhm.
execution is just not very good. And I think that's Doris Wishman in a nutshell. The way she does her movies is she comes up with a great title, a great premise, and then she basically just makes it up on the spot from there, and a little bit more planning and foresight and detail, and this could have been really good. But as it is, it's a despite a lot of good things I'm saying about it, it's still, even just at an hour, it's a tough watch even at an hour.
It does feel longer than an hour, and like I
It
said,
feels like three. It feels like
that
3 hours.
that 2 minute fight scene seemed longer than 2 minutes. But I have to say, though, at the very end of the movie here, we get the wavy lines, and we go back to the present where he's, been beaten up in the pool hall, Frankie, and he sort of sits up and he says, "I suppose I should have kept away from her. She was my brother's wife." And that's how the movie ends. And I thought that was brilliant. It's a
Yeah.
brilliant ending,
Yeah.
and using the title of the film, which, I'm kind of obsessed with when they use the title of the film.
Yeah,
Um,
the cat and the canary.
so, yeah, so I thought that was a great, great ending. And actually, before that, when Bob overhears his wife talking to Frankie and they're kind of declaring love, he doesn't confront them. He kind of walks out and he says, "She's so young. She cried out for love, and I didn't listen." And I thought, again, this is kind of brilliant. And he actually says she can take the money. Without her, I don't need it. So he's actually going to let her go, and he's going to let her take the money. He's kind of a good guy, right? But he disappears for a lot of the film. After that opening 15, 20 minutes, we don't see him for a long time, and then he kind of shows up just in time to overhear that stuff. But there's an example of a relationship that could have been developed a little more or something. But and I found it interesting too that even though we're a little bit past the Hays Code at this point when this film came out, but still there was a strong sense of, crime needs to be punished and this sort of thing. And Frankie kind of gets off pretty lightly for everything he's done. He's betrayed his brother. He's tried to steal his brother's life savings. He's had sex with his brother's wife. He's really caused the death of his brother's wife, but he just gets a beating. And that's it, right? The movie kind of ends. Like, there isn't a sense of him really paying for all this in a way. Just a beating in a pool hall seems like a light sentence for him.
Mhm.
What did you think about that?
Well, I mean, that's the nature of roughies. That's kind of why I like them, is they're darker in tone.
Hmm.
So I think it's more realistic in that sense, in that there isn't always that happy ending.
Yeah.
But I think that's the appeal of roughies, is that,
Yeah.
I mean, I forgot which roughie I saw, but there was a roughie where a woman essentially she's a prude throughout the whole movie. She gets raped, and the happy ending is her being raped. You know, she got what she deserved. You know,
I thought you were going to say she learns that she likes sex, which is the happy ending. But no, she gets punished. So,
there's actually a Wishman movie like that. I think it's Bad Girls Go to Hell, which is
oh
one
yeah,
we could have done as well. But again, I the reason the Scumbag Hustlers is the reason why I wanted to do this one in particular. And it would have, Bad Girls Go to Hell would have been just like this, a great premise, and it would have been a tough watch either way.
yeah,
But Bad Girls Go to Hell was another movie from Wishman that I liked, and it's one of the movies that feminists gravitate to the most, because you have this woman, again, a woman as the lead character in a roughie, is a Wishman trademark, but she wants sex from her husband and he rejects her, and then she proceeds to get raped and assaulted and raped, and she goes from house to house. It's almost like a Alice in Wonderland, where she's just traveling around where these different things are happening to her. But everywhere she goes, she keeps getting treated badly by everyone. And the lesson is, I guess, like, women shouldn't want sex. And then at the end, she wakes up and it was all a dream. And I think the way feminists view it is the fact that she wanted sex is why it happened. And then when she wakes up from the dream, everything plays out the way it did in the dream, like it's happening all over again, because again, she wanted sex from her husband. So women and their desire for sex does play a part, consciously or subconsciously, in roughies, and it does seem that women do get punished for wanting sex and sexual gratification. But yeah, Bad Girls Go to Hell was a pretty dark movie as well. Another good one. There's actually another good line in that. You mentioned a few really good lines in this. You're right, that ending where he's like, is, was my brother's life. That's a great way to end it. But
Yeah.
in Bad Girls Go to Hell, there was another good line too, where one of the adventures or one of the misadventures that the main actress lead character goes on is one of the people she stays with is a woman, and the woman is a lesbian and loves her, and she's like, I love you, and she's like, I love you too, that's why I have to leave, and again, it's kind of a deep line if it was
Mhm.
fleshed out. It says something about society or religion and like how people feel about homosexuality. There could be a lot to develop there. But that's the
Mhm.
issue with Wishman. She shows you these sparks, but either she does not execute it, she doesn't have the patience to execute it. It's just about, hey, a good title, a good poster, a good trailer, and make my money back. You
Mhm.
don't know what's going on in her mind, but based on her interviews, there wasn't a lot going on as trying to really accomplish anything beyond getting her money back.
Yeah. Well, I suppose what you could say about a movie like this is it has ideas in it that make sense, but they're not quite developed right. There's kind of a series of what we might call unearned moments, like where she goes to the kitchen and is like, wow, he's really interesting. He's more exciting. And it's like, but he hasn't said or done anything that would make you say that, like you need to write the scene that kind of makes her think that, you've got to earn that moment. But it's more, she
Show don't
just,
tell, as they say.
yeah, she just sort of knows that, okay, this is what I need to have happen. She needs to become interested in this guy, you know, but there's nothing there to kind of show why she would be interested in this guy. It's not quite properly written in that way, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. I trust me, I know. I've seen a lot of films. I know. As far as recommending this film, I don't know if I can because it is a tough watch. But I'd say, I mean, I find her movies endearing, and I wanted to do this review, and overall I'm glad we did it.
Mhm.
But I don't know how much a modern moviegoer would get out of this because the sex and titillation, you're right, 24 minutes into the movie before, which is essentially halfway through the movie in a way, before you
Mhm.
see nudity. I mean, you're not going to be watching these movies for titillation anyway, because these are like, by today's beauty standards, these aren't necessarily women that are like you're dying to see naked anyway. I mean, they're decent looking women, but they're not, you know, silver screen type women. They're not like models or tens or anything like that. They're kind of like everyday average looking women. They're not fantasy girls, and average bodies, and waiting 30 minutes to see some breasts, I don't think that is really going to interest a lot of people in today's day and age. And to see like a middle-aged man just laying on top of some model like lifelessly, while dialogue spews about how passionate it is. I don't know if that's grabbing a bunch of people. And all of this just to see maybe about 5 minutes of like some really good scenes. I don't know if that's going to appeal to anyone, like any younger viewers, but if you're, a film buff, then I think it's a good watch. And for someone like myself, I love her films.
Yeah. Well, I think it's certainly not going to appeal to everyone. And you're right. I always think about this review I read back in the '80s, which was of a teen sex comedy that had come out. And the reviewer said that when he was young, he went to see an adult film, and he was only 17, so he had to lie. He had to use fake ID to get in to see this adult film. And he said the film just had nothing in it really. And then at the last minute, some woman took her top off and she had a bra on, and that was it. Like that was how adult this movie was. And here in the 80s, there's this comedy that isn't even restricted, and there's like full frontal nudity in it. And he was just kind of shocked and scandalized by that because what used to be an adult film, just had nothing on this mainstream comedy film. And so, yeah, I think audiences today will be puzzled to think that this was essentially an adult film of the day, right? This was the kind of film you would have gone to a special theater to see, and you'd have to be 18. Um, and yeah, it's like, yeah, there's some nudity, but it's pretty tasteful, really, by today's standards. It's not going to be, yeah, it's not going to resemble what we think of as porn, that's for sure. But I think the reasons to watch it are the campiness, the moments that make you laugh, and I did laugh several times throughout this movie. And it does have kind of a retro charm, I think, and almost a retro uh, eroticism, I suppose you could say, where the black and white photography. I don't know. There's something about it. It just, I think, as a vintage experience, I think it will work for some people, but it won't work for everyone. And some people will not even watch it because it's in black and white. They refuse to see anything in black and white, which I think is ridiculous. But for those who like old movies and weird movies, I think this one is worth a look, and certainly some of Doris Wishman's other films are definitely worth a look.
You said three facts. It's black and white, it's old, and it's weird. Everything else is subjective.
That's right. That's why it's a review, I guess. It's a subjective opinion. But yeah, it's old, it's black and white, and it's weird. Definitely.
It's something weird.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is.